Hello again, Professor Sackett-Taylor here. This video lecture focuses on Chapter 2, Resources, Environment, and Economic Development from Environmental and Natural Resource Economics, a Contemporary Approach by Harris and Roach. This is a video lecture made for the fall 2021 class of ECON 321 Natural Resource Economics. So let's get started. So in this video lecture, we really want to draw our attention or our focus to this idea that economic growth may not be, the goal of economic growth may not be in line with a goal of environmental protection and conservation, that the two might actually be at odds with one another. So let's remind ourselves, let's go back to Econ 101, our principles of macro class, remind ourselves how we measure economic growth. So traditionally, from a macro sense, we use gross domestic product, which is the total market value of all final goods and services produced within our borders in a given year. So the GDP growth rate is going to be the annual change in GDP expressed as a percentage. So when we're looking at GDP for an entire population, we'll look at per capita GDP times the size of the population. And then we'll look at that per capita GDP growth rate as being a multiple of the population growth rate. So this means that the population, the size of the population is very important when thinking about economic growth, as well as thinking about the amount of natural resources that we require to grow the amount of goods and services that are produced. And so therefore, there's really three factors that are essential to thinking about economic growth. The first here is using the environment as a source of energy. So particularly, we're thinking about non-renewable energies like fossil fuels, natural gas, and also renewable energies such as wind, solar, and geothermal. We also need to think critically about the factor of natural capital. Natural capital meaning how much, or the endowment of, the land and resources that we have access to, including air, water, soil, forests, fisheries, minerals, all the different kinds of ecological life support systems. That's what we think of as natural capital. How much access do we have to that? And finally, if we're thinking about both the earth as a source for our economic activity and a sink, then we need to think about the absorptive capacity of the environment to act as a sink for our waste and our pollution. So how do we put a value on these things if we're thinking about the extraction of natural resources and the earth or the environment as a sink for our waste and pollution? How do we value the costs and the benefits of those activities? Let's watch this short video. So I hope what you gain from that video is that the value of the environment or the value of nature goes well beyond its productive use. We can't simply look at a forest and say, well, what is the value of this forest? Well, it's whatever we can sell the lumber for. Or we don't look at the fish that we take out of the ocean and say, well, what is the value of these fish? It's what they sell at the fish market for, right? It's not just the product, the productive use, but it's also the services, or in other words, the interconnected systems, loops, the ways in which other organisms rely on one another to be well, to prosper, to continue living, to continue reproducing, right? It's the ways in which environments work in tandem with all of its many living organisms inside, that if you extract one, what's left is no longer whole and doesn't act the same way. It doesn't provide the same kinds of actions or services any longer without that missing piece. And so it's not just what can we produce when we extract this, but it's what are we giving up? What are we taking away from ourselves, from future generations, by plucking out a piece of this puzzle? So thinking about that, let's return to this idea of population and why it matters so much. Population, and specifically here, human population, is the key variable in understanding the limits to our economic growth. This has very different implications for the developed world versus the developing world, those who are currently industrialized and those who are still industrializing. For developing countries, they have the most rapid population growth rate, which means that they have an even stronger limiting factor on their growth and how that growth is going to happen in a sustainable way. So let's think more about this. All of this brings us to what, there's a link here in the slides, when you look at the slides yourself, to what some would call the 11 biggest environmental issues of our time. So the first is poor governance. We as a people across the globe are really not very good at coming together, making collective decisions, and following through on the actions that we propose. Food waste. Why is it that we have, and just let's think about just our own nation. We are both, there's one of my favorite books, is called Stuffed and Starved. We are simultaneously stuffed and starved in the same nation, in the same city, in the same neighborhood. We have people who are experiencing really negative health effects of obesity. And in that same city, that same neighborhood, there are people who are so malnourished and they're starving. Why? Why are we able to overfeed some while there are so many that are underfed? Biodiversity loss, right? This is what I was just speaking about, how ecological systems are so complex and every piece matters. Every piece is connected to every other piece. And when you take one piece out of that puzzle, the rest of it can't function the same way anymore. This is biodiversity loss. This is when we lose the number of species of plants and insects and animals that used to feed into this complex system. The systems themselves start to crumble. Plastic pollution, right? The use of one-time use plastics. We just make it, we use it, we throw it out. It has to go somewhere. Oftentimes it's going into our waterways, into our oceans, into the food system. Deforestation, air pollution, global warming as a result of fossil fuel use, sea level rise, ocean acidification, intensive agriculture, water insecurity. These are all issues that you may wish to look further into and develop your research project around. But I encourage you to think about where they impact you in your own life. Where do you see this happening? Or is this some like far away thing that you can kind of distance yourself from? And if you have been distancing yourself from it, why? Right? I know it makes it easier. There's an emotional energy that's required when we think about how this impacts other people. But eventually it all comes back home to us in one way or another. So I encourage you now, maybe you pause this video, maybe you go to this link in the slides and think about where you see these things showing up in your own life. So here's a discussion question for you to think about and reflect on and bring back with you the next time we meet in class. How do you think we need to approach environmental issues differently in developed or industrialized countries and developing or industrializing countries? What do you see as the main challenge facing each of these groups? So bring that with you to discuss next time, and I'll see you then.